Before we start the discussion today, let me have a pleasure thanking all our viewers, those who have joined us on live Facebook. Thank you all. Thank you so much for your valuable time, and I am sure this discussion today would edify all and strengthen your capacity towards building up a sustainable and adaptive ecosystem. All our viewers can interact to panelists through comments and likes. So please keep posting and your comments and likes. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted how critical the practice of hand washing can be preventing the transmission of life-threatening disease. Evidence shows that improved hand hygiene can eliminate the presence of several key disease-causing pathogens and significantly improves sanitation and health outcome among the communities. Improved health outcomes are seen to particularly sustainable among the children as hand washing with the soap is known to prevent two clinical syndromes that are responsible for the largest number of childhood deaths globally, diarrhea and respiratory illness. With the brief context, let's start our discussion by introduction of our panel member. Next in the panel, we have Dr. Yannam Deepak. He is a medical officer in charge of UPHC Ghatikia with the special interest of filmmaking and social causes. Dr. Deepak, please provide your brief introduction.
Hello to all the dignitaries, my fellow youth, and to Nicole ma'am, and to all who joined over Facebook. So today we all here for the wash. So this all which I was doing at the community level. So being at an interactive session with other people, like apart from the health sectors, this is a common for all of us. So which is a platform for us, all of us today. And yes, I'm doing this wash techniques and wash programs. Hopefully we all together can achieve once we are united.
Yes, absolutely. Now we have Miss Panda. She is research consultant of IIPH. Her area of interest is being menstrual hygienic management. Nisi, please provide your brief introduction.
I am Nishisipa Panda and I'm working in consultations in association with IIPH Bhubaneswar, and I'm currently working on a project of menstrual health and hygiene. And needless to say, hand hygiene comes to be a very important aspect of it. So yeah, looking forward to this panel discussion today.
Now we have Miss Shagun. She is a pursuing Bachelor's in Sustainable Development Honors from XIM University, Bhubaneswar.
Thank you, Aditya, for the introduction. So as you mentioned, I'm Shagun and I'm in my final year and I'm studying sustainable development. So my area of interest basically includes youth engagement for inclusive climate action. I've been working on various projects regarding the same, and it feels great to be present here amongst other panelists, Nicole and you, Aditya, of course. Looking forward to a great discussion ahead.
Now, Nicole, I would request you to please give us a brief introduction on hand hygiene.
Thank you so much, and very, very excited to be amongst this group of people. I'll quickly share my screen. I'll try to keep it short, and I unfortunately have to stop my video because I'm based in Kathmandu and our Wi-Fi is a little weak today. So, hand hygiene. You've already given quite the interesting little summary on what hand washing or why hand washing is so important. And I think key is obviously hand hygiene helps us to stay healthy. It also helps us to stay well. It gives us a feeling of being clean and well taken care of. However, currently we do have this hand washing facility with soap and water. So what is universal hand hygiene? COVID-19 has given us a great opportunity in this sense, as that hand hygiene was started to be promoted from the beginning of the emergence of the pandemic. Other organizations from the private sector, different UN agencies, different NGOs all came together to create the Hand Hygiene for All initiative. Now, what do we understand as hand hygiene coverage? What do we say when we need hand hygiene for all? There is the Joint Monitoring Program, which is a monitoring mechanism created by the UN that monitors the SDG 6, under which all wash and hand hygiene activities would fall. 6.2, access to sanitation and hygiene. There we have three kind of different definitions of what hand hygiene could be, where you would say you have a hand washing facilities with soap and water, but not constantly. And then third, basic, the availability of a hand washing facility with soap and water at home. So this is kind of what we're aiming at getting to. There is lots of guidance on national, global monitoring for different key settings and so on. But how do we now get to universal hand hygiene? What does it need? What does it mean? It, number one, needs strong governance. It needs strong leaders that understand the importance of hand hygiene and the importance of stakeholder engagement, clear policies that are guiding the change. And that doesn't necessarily need to be government. That can be youth organizations, that can be NGOs, that can be anyone who kind of tries to work towards the achievement of it. It needs funding. Neither water nor soap nor actual hand washing facilities come for free, unfortunately. And specifically, government budget lines are required for specific settings, such as healthcare facility of everyone involved on all kinds of different levels of stakeholders. So starting from government capacity, starting from bottom up, top down, people need to understand why they should wash their hands, why it's important, and how they can properly do it. And then we need those that are teaching the others, so hand hygiene curricula development and so on. And then we need innovation. It is not yet fully functional. We're not there yet. As I said, 3 out of 10 people in South Asia do not have access to hand hygiene facilities. So we need different kind of products and different approaches towards behavior change that can be private sector driven, that can be NGO or government led. But the idea would be to have the right supply as well as the right demand level across the country. So if all those 5 sectors that we call in the WASH sector within the UN setting, we call the enabling environment blocks, so governance, financing, data and information, capacity and innovation are all there, this should lead to about 100%, hopefully, coverage in facilities and practice. And that includes all different settings, households, institutions, ranging from schools, healthcare facilities, but also prisons and public spaces, so markets, car parks, eating establishments, malls, and so on, and workplaces, of course. An interesting aspect of this going forward and looking a little bit into the future is how do we factor climate change in? Hand hygiene and climate change don't necessarily on the first kind of glance seem to be connected. But I think this little table gives quite a good understanding of how we need to factor climate change in going forward when we do provide hand hygiene facilities. Floods and kind of hurricanes, etc., can destroy infrastructure. It changes the availability of water or clean water. It can disrupt supply chains, and suddenly there is no soap available on the market anymore. So, as I said, this is something that we really kind of need to take into account going forward.
Presentation, it was really interesting. Nicole, I would start by asking a question.
Of course.
Yes. How we can use technology in hand hygiene so that the process become much easier, and what is the more challenges in that?
Didn't you say you would ask easy questions? So I think in terms of technology, it is really important that we do have a certain focus on innovation, that we have a certain focus on product, but only if it responds to actual needs. So often we see innovation for innovation's sake, and the private sector kind of is looking towards developing the next product that they can sell. And often those that want to use those hand washing facilities, they don't necessarily, we've learned over studies and studies, permanent fixtures, so permanent hand washing stations are better than temporary ones. We have learned that a dedicated hand washing station is very good, but it's not necessarily the main solution. And if the funding is an issue, we don't necessarily need to invest funds in it. Flexible hand washing stations or like alternative handmade solutions can be really good depending on the situation. So I think technology has to play a role very much where it comes to behavior change, where we need to make an effort in investing in proper operation and maintenance so that we develop and use technologies that are sustainable, that take, as I mentioned earlier, certain climate risks into account, that, you know, might break down during a flooding, but are quick and easy to be set up again once the flooding subsides, or that kind of deal with a situation where they're on raised platforms. So there is many aspects regarding climate change, regarding usability, and also regarding the need of the population that you want to cover, that really need to be taken into account versus the use of technology for the use of technology. One aspect I think that's very interesting where technology comes in is the monitoring of behavior. So there is interesting pilot projects that are currently ongoing in a variety of schools where children get to punch in a number every time they wash their hands, and then they get little points for this, and they can do class competitions, and the class that uses the most, that washes their hands the best and the most regularly wins a prize at the end of the month. So those, I think, are good uses for technology that can drive the behavior and make the technology that we want to use more robust towards future climate changes.
Thank you, Nicole. Now, Miss Baby Nayak, who joined us from Vadrak, I would request her to kindly introduce herself and inviting her to ask the question to Nicole.
I have two questions, ma'am. The first one is in the definition of the WASH, which you have displayed, the data and the information. So the role of data and the information. So what role actually the data and the information plays? I really face a lot of community level, which is very difficult. Still trying to get it done. So in your point of view, what the data and the information plays a role?
So if I understood correctly, the connection wasn't 100% clear. The question would be, what kind of role does data and information management play towards hand hygiene?
Hi, I'm Baby Nayak, working with WaterAid India in Bhadrak district of Odisha. We are working for the disaster resilient wash program, basically water sanitation and hygiene programs. So we are working with communities which are marginalized, basically. So the poor of the poor, basically. So we are working for them, like providing the toilet retrofitting works. So my question is, how the marginalized community people will wash their hand daily basis with low cost soap? How we can promote the hand washing practices in the marginalized households?
If it's all right with you, I would quickly respond to Dr. Deepak's question first, just before I forget. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
We'll come back to your question.
Yes.
Data and information is what makes us understand where we are, right? It is what gives us the evidence of where we are. It gives us an idea of what is really going on. It's not just kind of collecting data for data, but it's really, when you collect data, it needs to be meaningful. You need to also kind of be able to act on it. And I think that's something that we often have a hard time doing with hand hygiene, because it's a hard one to monitor, right? We can count hand washing stations. That's an easy one. You're a doctor, you know exactly, there is 5 different situations in touch points with the patient and so on, where WHO prescribes to have hand hygiene opportunities, hand washing stations or hand rub in place and what doctors should practice it.
Yes, ma'am.
But then how do we monitor this? Do we constantly observe every doctor, every round, every time, if it's actually practiced? So practice often is observed rather through secondary indicators, such as the presence of soap, the fact that the soap is used, the usage of water, the presence or absence of hand rub, alcohol-based hand rub. Having the detailed picture of what is going on in hand hygiene will then allow us to prioritize where we should focus our attention. If the issue is that every time, someone in the community wants to wash their hands, but there is no water, and we can observe that, and our statistics shows us that due to that we have increased diarrhea cases, or that the water program, the Jal Jeevan mission mainline that was just brought to the village, actually decreases diarrhea situations and decreases the prevalence of skin diseases or anything related that's very much hygiene related. Through those secondary and observatory indicators, we can then decide where to prioritize our activities further. As I said, hand hygiene notoriously difficult to monitor, notoriously difficult to understand the data, and then that's just kind of the availability of facilities and the availability of supplies. And then we need to understand the other side of data that we need to collect, and the other side of information that we need to collect in regards to the behaviors. Where we really need to understand, why are people washing their hands? Why are they not washing their hands? The formative research. What are their barriers to doing so? What would motivate them to do so, right? It's we often argue with, you need to wash your hands because you want to be healthy. But maybe you need to wash your hands because then your hands feel better, might be the better message. So it's really kind of understanding the community and the behaviors and the reason why people do something. So kind of the formative research on the social behavior side, where we need to have the data, where we need to really understand what is happening. And then on the supply side, on the facilities side, on the side of soaps and so on, soap availability, water availability, that will then enable us to focus our activities and our promotional activities, or our donations, our distributions, whatever it might be, on the right aspects. Does that answer the question a little bit? Because it's a very, very tricky one. Wonderful. You said you had a second question, or shall I move on to the one from Baby?
We'll come back in the second round, ma'am, for the second question.
Fantastic. Marginalized communities. Very, very, very difficult to answer. Again, you're having all the hard questions with me today. Very often what we try to do is we try to come in with pro-poor products. So smaller soap packages that instead of 60 rupees cost 20 rupees, but then are actually much smaller in comparison to the 60 rupee one. And if you would buy the same amount, you end up spending more money. So very often, if we follow the private sector in terms of pro-poor strategies, we do end up supporting aspects that might cost more. That is just something to really keep in mind on any kind of low-cost opportunities that we're looking at. Soap is soap. But on the other hand, lots of studies and kind of usage studies specifically have shown that if it's low-cost soap, if it doesn't smell as well, if it doesn't foam as nicely, people are less inclined to use them. So maybe encouraging and understanding the opportunity to spend a little bit more on the higher level, higher quality product will translate into more use, which means we automatically gain, because someone who buys soap that they don't really like and then in return doesn't end up using them ever. And we all have those products at home, right? We all have purchased something that we thought, oh, that's cheap, I'm going to use it. But then we're not really happy with it, and so we end up not using it and should have better spent a little bit more money or opted for the better product, because then we would actually use it. So that's something really to think around soap use and the opportunities that are within soap use, specifically when it comes to children, for example. There are wonderful, like very playful opportunities, soaps, products specifically that have a little toy in them, or products that have a lovely shape where the soap is a duck or a goat or a heart or a rainbow or whatever it might be. There is great opportunities. There are organizations that are recycling soap. As long as the quality assurance is in place, that's a wonderful opportunity as well to kind of create and support marginalized communities in their access to lower cost but still high quality products. I think what's most important, though, in the end, when we deal with any marginalized community, may it be poor communities, may it be specific groups of people, tribal communities, people living with disabilities, and so on, is to understand what drives them to wash their hands, what would enable them. So kind of, again, doing this barrier analysis on what would they really need, combine this formative research. The motivation needs to be there. If the motivator is the soap that's a little bit nicer, has a different color. You know, often coloring of soap happens automatically, and the nicer color doesn't even cost more than another one. So again, kind of trying to understand what would motivate those marginalized communities to practice hand hygiene, and then come up with the product that's appropriate for them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Aditya, over to you again, I think.
Yes. Nisi, I would request you to ask the question next.
Yeah, sure. Hello, ma'am. I would like to actually, this is what we have experienced during our field visits, that in the rural and tribal areas, particularly, there is still a crisis or scarcity of clean water. So, according to your experience, what are the ideal options or solutions that we can provide them to maintain proper hygiene?
The questions get tougher. I thought I had a tough one at the beginning. Let's be honest. I think no one who doesn't have enough water to drink in extreme water scarcity will use water to wash their hands, to practice hygiene, and that is a very, very vicious circle, because not being able to practice proper hygiene will bring you into this vicious cycle of getting more sick, specifically valid for children. But at the same time, obviously understandable. It's very hard when you walk for a couple of hours every day and you come back with one bucket of water that is drinkable or that could be treated, to be able to then use it for hand hygiene. It's a very, very tough choice. In situations where it's not quite as bad, I think the most important thing is to have the right technology. There are opportunities, that have, for example, it's just very simple, the reuse of certain types of plastic bottles with holes pierced into the lid, where you really minimize the use of water because you can control it very well. They're called tippy taps. It's a wonderful kind of little homemade, self-made tool that allows people to have a dedicated hand washing station. It is the opportunity to reuse water wherever is possible. So water that has been used to clean dishes or to boil or cook things in, if it's treated properly, and that can be done with solar disinfection or whatever, again, very low tech opportunities. We can reuse water for hand hygiene. It doesn't necessarily have to be kind of virgin water. It can be a second or third use of the water even. And then it's ensuring that the right knowledge levels are there. We always talk about certain, key moments to wash your hands. And even there is a little bit of a prioritization that's possible where you really kind of understand what are my key moments to wash my hands. When do I really need to make sure that I do it properly? Anytime before preparing a meal, anytime before, feeding yourself or your child, after having used the toilet and so on. But then there are many other moments that often get promoted as well, and that are not as, I don't want to say that are not important, obviously they are, but that are not as key. So I think this combination of having the right technology, having the right understanding of what are opportunities for supplies and how can water be reused and retreated, as well as then the knowledge of the right moments and the key moments to wash your hands.
Thank you, Nicole. Shagun, your question, please.
Hi, Nicole.
I see she's putting the question in the chat. So the role of geography and norms in the concept of hand hygiene. Ooh, Shagun, I know you're a climate person, right? So, all right, basically all of you are. I'm gonna refer geography a little bit to climate and kind of refer back to the answer already on water scarcity, for example, where I think I've given a couple of examples of what can be done. Because access to water is obviously key to any practice on hand hygiene, hand washing. And therefore, geography obviously plays kind of a key role in not only habits, but also what societal norms exist, because societal norms often come out of the environment that the society kind of exists in. Obviously, if you, your family, your 2-3 generations ahead have lived in water scarce areas, your parents will have brought you up with a different kind of norms and habits. So I think that's kind of the role that geography and norms interact in. I'm not sure how, maybe you can give me a little bit more details on the question, but obviously norms in general are key to any kind of hand hygiene behavior, and they are also key to be, or they are necessary to understand if we want to change anyone's behavior. And I think key is, and I just said it, and I kind of said it wrong even, we don't need to change people's behavior, we need to change people's minds. They need to understand, they need to really internalize the need for hand hygiene, the need to wash your hands, not just because it keeps you healthy, but really also whichever argument, whichever motivator they have to wash their hands, we should use that, and we should kind of try to change those hearts and minds and make sure that it's important. One of the dreams of mine, for example, to do so is, wouldn't it be fantastic to have a Bollywood movie where you have a couple of scenes where, the heroes come in and out of houses and they wash their hands? Wouldn't it be a fantastic thing? We see in movies, we see all kinds of things happening, but have you ever seen someone on screen wash the hands. It's not something that's aspirational. It's something that if we would see it more regularly, it would become more of a norm. That Bollywood movies, TV series, radio, just kind of make it a norm for us to be confronted with the habit, with this practice of having of washing your hands. I think that would be wonderful. And I think what we can learn a lot from in this regards are anti-smoking campaigns. In the 50s, everyone on the screen was smoking. That got outlawed. That's just not a cool thing anymore to do. Movies started making fun of smokers and so on, and so suddenly we didn't see it as much anymore. And I think in terms of changing hand hygiene norms, there is a lot we can learn from those kinds of behavior change campaigns that really have managed to penetrate the global and throughout all kinds of levels. So talking about norms in hand hygiene, they're extremely important, and we need to normalize hand hygiene much more, and we just need to see much more of it.
Thank you, Nicole. Mr. Deepak, Dr. Deepak, you have a question, right? Could you please ask?
Yes. My second round, my second question in the second round is the importance of the community and the outreach programs and the community cooperation. So it's a mix-up question, ma'am.
For hand hygiene.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
For hand hygiene, community cooperation,
Okay.
and community outreach programs, which we can do.
Okay.
And the hand-in-hand coordination with the community.
Yeah.
In hand hygiene.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very, very similar to my answer in terms of the societal norms. Communities, if we work together with communities, what we first need to do is we need to understand them. So having community outreach workers coming from specific communities, specifically when we're talking about marginalized communities or tribal communities that have their own societal norms and their own kind of barriers and motivators to practice certain behaviors. I think it's important that we it's so key to understand those first. And then based on this understanding, really start developing our outreach programming. There is this saying of there is not a single wall in India that is not painted, right? I mean, the amount of motivational messages and COVID messages and everything that we have on walls, does it? Yes, it's a good tool, but does it really do much? What other alternative means of changing minds and behaviors could we use? There is the concept of environmental nudging, where you're confronted with different approaches. There is a great example used in schools to motivate school children. After using the toilet, there are little footsteps that are painted on the floor towards the hand washing station. So that automatically, kind of on autopilot, not consciously thinking about it, they leave the toilet and they follow the colorful path towards the hand washing station, stand there, wash their hands, and then move on. And I think that those are things that can be translated into the community. Make hand washing stations beautiful. Put mirrors on them with eyes that are painted on the mirror that people feel observed. And the second they feel observed, they feel a little bit more control. And if it's already a societal norm that you should wash your hands, because the knowledge is there in most of the communities these days, specifically after COVID, after messaging of wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. People have a higher prevalence of practicing just because there is a pair of eyes painted on a mirror. So there are again a lot of those low cost opportunities, environmental nudges they're called, that could be used to work in communities. We can translate the experience that we have in communities. But key and first and foremost, we need to understand the communities that we want to work with, and we need to understand what is it. And we don't need to assume that, you know, they're not washing their hands because they don't want to. They're too lazy. They don't care. They don't have water. They don't have soap. So all we need to do is bring in this, or we need to do fancy hand washing stations. Maybe that's not the solution either. Really understanding our communities before we're planning an outreach strategy, before we're bringing supplies, is my #1 advocacy. And then things start to fall in place much more. And if we have good examples, if you know, the village chief, the self-help group, or you know, anyone in the village, maybe 10% start washing their hands regularly, be seen regularly washing their hands, most people will eventually fall in place, because it's going to turn into a societal norm.
Yes. Thank you, Nicole. Baby, you have a question. Could you please ask?
Yeah. Thank you, Nicole. Sorry, again, I'm going to ask you another question.
Of course.
My question will be, we know lactating and pregnant mothers, they are more cautious about their baby's health. How we will literate or educate the mothers for practicing the hand washing in the critical times, basically?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's a wonderful moment when a young mother is so willing to do everything, and fathers as well, right? Why should we only put the work on the mothers? Young parents, let's say in general, do everything for their children. And it's the right moment to kind of come in with messages. At the same time, we need to be very conscious of it's a very difficult time, right? It's a very difficult time. You don't know, specifically with #1. I have 2, and with #1, I had no idea what I was doing. And any message on top of, you know, just pure survival mode would have been difficult for me to take up. So I also think we need to not expect too much. It's not pure education. It's kind of telling stories. It's being able to put the habit of hand hygiene and to put this practice of hand hygiene into the whole narrative of having a healthy child, of having a healthy family, of having a happy, and that is an incredible, powerful motivator for families to want to do the right thing. And coming in with education at this moment is great, but I think hand hygiene needs to be mainstreamed. It needs to be part of the conversation of how do I feed my baby, and let's leave out water scarce areas right now. What is the right moment to wash my hands when I'm breastfeeding? How do I do this?
As Nicole suggested, very insightful things for all the delegates. Now I would like to express my gratitude to all the esteemed delegates of the webinar and their presence and contribution to make the webinar is a grand success. I extend my gratitude to our, yes, Nicole joined again. Yes, Nicole. I extend my gratitude to Nicole to take time from her busy schedule to grace the event.
It was my pleasure. I hope it did answer those very, very tricky and hard questions a little bit. And I'm really looking forward to engaging again anytime.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful
session.
Thank you.
And wash your hands.
Yes.